We think of South Africa as a real powerhouse in its region. But what happens when that country's shield starts to crack? Today, we're diving into the critical state of South Africa's defense force. And let me tell you, the numbers are way more startling than you might think.
Is South Africa actually becoming defenseless? And look, I know it sounds pretty dramatic, right? But stick with me, because the evidence we're about to dig into, well, it really makes you wonder.
So first up, let's talk about what's at stake here. You've got a nation at risk. And the reason this matters is because when a country's official military gets weaker, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It can create this dangerous power gap, which might just open the door for things like an internal insurgency.
And that right there is the big worry. The analysis we're looking at basically concludes that South Africa might not be prepared to deal with those kinds of threats if they pop up. So the huge question is, how on earth did things get to this point?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this perfect storm of different challenges, all hitting at once, that have really been squeezing the country's security for years now. Let's break down what that storm was actually made of.
Okay, take a look at this. You know, they say money talks, and in this case, it is screaming. South Africa's defense spending is sitting at less than 1% of its GDP. Now, to put that in perspective, the global average is about 2%. And a regional power like Egypt? They're spending 2.4%. That's not a small difference. That is a massive, massive funding gap.
But that funding gap, that's only one piece of the puzzle. You got to throw two other huge problems into the mix. First, crippling corruption, which just gutted state-owned companies like the arms manufacturer Dino. Then, on top of all that, you get the massive economic shock from the pandemic. So you've got this triple whammy that has just systematically worn down the military's ability to do its job.
So we've talked about the why, now let's get into the what. What does this perfect storm actually do to the tanks, planes, and ships? And folks, this is where the numbers start to get, well, honestly, they're pretty shocking. Let's take a look at the real state of the fleet.
All right, let this sink in for a second. This comes from a government brief. Less than a quarter of the entire South African Air Force is actually able to fly. I mean, just think about that. Over 3/4 of the country's military aircraft are stuck on the ground.
And this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's so clear. Out of 217 total aircraft, you see that tiny little sliver? That's 46. That's all that's operational. The rest of that huge chunk, 171 aircraft, are completely unserviceable. You almost don't even need the numbers. The visual alone tells the whole story.
Okay, now let's drill down because it gets even worse when you look at the specifics. The entire fleet of 26 advanced Gripen fighter jets, you know, the tip of the spear, 0 are serviceable, not one. Their own domestically built Ruavalk attack helicopters, only 4 out of 11 can even get off the ground. And what about getting troops and supplies where they need to go? Just one C-130 cargo plane is working out of a fleet of 6. This isn't just a general problem. It's a crisis affecting the most critical pieces of their air force.
And it's not just what's in the air. The situation on the ground is just as bad. Get this, a single fire at a vehicle depot back in 2021 destroyed over 200 vehicles. Just poof, gone. When your force is already stretched thin, losing that much equipment in one go is absolutely devastating.
And guess what? It's the exact same story out at sea. The Navy has 4 main frigates, only one is actually operational. They have 3 submarines, a really key strategic asset for any Navy. Just one of them is serviceable. Are you seeing the pattern here? It's the same grim picture across every single branch of the military.
What does this all actually mean? You've got a hollowed-out Air Force, an Army that's lost a ton of equipment, and a Navy that's basically stuck in port. When you put all of that together, the implications, well, they go right to the very heart of national security.
All of these things, the budget cuts, the corruption, the broken down hardware, they aren't just logistical headaches. They ultimately place the country's sovereignty at risk. I mean, wow. That's the real bottom line, the most severe consequence of all. So we end up right back where we started, but now with a much clearer and frankly a much scarier picture. The numbers don't lie. They paint a portrait of a defense force that's in a serious, serious state of decline. And that leaves us with the biggest question of all. With its shield so badly broken, what on earth comes next for South Africa?